everybody that's come along, and I'd firstly like to say that it's amazing to be here at this MBN Solutions session. So thank you all for coming along. Thank you to the guys from MBN for inviting me along. And I know these guys really well, and I can genuinely say without any sort of affiliation with MBN that they are, these guys really get it in the data field. There's very few recruitment based companies within the data field that I believe truly understand how to work with data professionals, both from the client point of view and from the candidate point of view, and MBN are definitely one of those. So it is a delight for me to be here as well, because I do respect these guys. And I think it should be a fun session, and I'm looking forward to chatting with some of you guys or answering some questions in the Q&A afterwards as well. So my goal for today is to give you all some really simple but effective tips for how to get ahead in the hiring process, right from your resume, which is essentially your marketing document, right through to when you're sitting in that interview chair. And whether you're after your first role in the field or you're looking to move onwards and upwards from your current role, it is fair to say that data science is a very competitive place to be. There are so many people applying for each role. It's almost like a survival of the fittest situation going on. And this has been the case in years gone by, and it's still the case. But trust me when I say that there are changes, and that there are things you can do to make yourself stand out. And while the changes or tips that I'll suggest to you today are super simple, they are going to have a much bigger effect or a bigger impact than you might think they will. Anyway, before I get into all of that, I should probably introduce myself. Let me just make sure my slides are working. There we go. As I'm sure many of you won't be familiar with me necessarily or what I'm working on. So to start right from the top, my name's Andrew Jones. I've been working in the areas of analytics and data science for around 14 years now. But my journey to where I am now is a little bit of an odd one, especially when compared to most people who are in the data science area. So I didn't study data science or computer science or even mathematics at university. I did a degree in marketing and a degree in psychology. And I actually happened to just land my very first role as a marketing analyst back in New Zealand, simply through playing cricket with the manager of that team. And in this first role, I'd never done any programming before. I learned SQL, and also I started using a programming language called SAS. And I was just blown away with how you could not only manipulate and analyze data, but how you could use machine learning to essentially predict what customers were going to do next. And I was just hooked. I've been so passionate about it ever since that I've just continued learning and moving into different roles in different industries. And in more recent times, like Josh mentioned, I've been very fortunate to have worked for Amazon, as well as Sony PlayStation, where I was building and prototyping machine learning based features for the PlayStation 5, which, even though I'm not a gamer, as you can imagine, was a lot of fun. Anyway, since about March of 2020, so March of last year, I embarked on a completely new journey, creating my very own online data science learning platform or program called Data Science Infinity. And so this is what keeps me extremely busy these days. And without going into too much detail at this point, Data Science Infinity is a program that's built in a way that is different to any other data science course that is available. And at the highest of levels, it's all about getting students results. It's not so much about getting students another certificate to add to their resume. It's all about getting the results that you want. Anyway, back to my career, and this is more closely linked with what I'll be speaking to you about today. I've been in the very fortunate position to have interviewed and screened hundreds of analytical and data science candidates. And I say that I'm fortunate to have done this, as it's really allowed me to understand what it is that's the difference between the candidates who get the roles versus those who unfortunately miss out time and time again. So what I've done for today is I've distilled down some of these learnings and these findings into some key high-level tips that will hopefully help guide you into and then through the hiring process to a great role in this very exciting field. So let's just get straight into it. And I'll start by saying that the data science hiring process is a little bit broken. And now that's quite a big statement for somebody to make. So what do I mean by that? Well, even though the field is maturing, we're still seeing really, really bad interview and hiring practices. Some examples might be first, the data science job descriptions are still being loaded with every possible tool and programming language on the face of the earth. So, essentially anything in a company's tech stack is just being put onto the job description. Uh, Secondly, we're still seeing an overemphasis on the number of years experience a candidate has, or whether they have a master's or a PhD. And these things are awesome. I don't want to take anything away from somebody that's got a master's or a PhD. It's an incredible achievement, but they're not as strong an indicator of candidate value, or potentially more importantly, candidate potential as companies think they are. And the third one that I want to mention, and this is so common, and it just needs to change, is that in interviews, candidates are still being asked to complete these really specific, insanely difficult coding tasks that would never actually be needed in the role itself. It's truly bizarre that this is still happening. Um, and the reason that it's just not good practice is that a candidate that just happens to know the answer to that very specific question on that day is not necessarily the candidate who's going to serve the company best, in the actual day-to-day or week-to-week tasks that role actually requires. So as candidates, unfortunately, you're kind of up against it from moment one until we can start making some improvements within the hiring process. But believe me when I say that I'm very passionate about rectifying all of this. Not only, like I say, is it bad for candidates, it's also extremely inefficient for companies that are hiring. And on that note, I was recently asked to speak at a Data Science Go event, specifically for executives, and I ran them through why it's so efficient, as well as an approach that can be much more effective. So trust me, I am on your side. Anyway, even though the hiring process, can be seen as being a little bit broken at times, there are still a whole host of things that you can do to get yourself ahead of your competition. And that's really what I'm here to speak to you about today. So let's get stuck into that now. And there are really three main ways that you can showcase your skills as a new or aspiring data scientist or data analyst. You've got your resume or CV. You've potentially got a portfolio of projects that you've built or you've worked on. And then I guess you could say that actually, interviewing for roles is showcasing yourself too. It's just much, much more formal. And that interview stage, that can take on many forms itself. So that can be technical or coding tests, take-home assignments, or obviously the more behavioral based interview questions. And all of these areas make up a huge part of what I am helping my students with every day within Data Science Infinity. But because we don't have all the time in the world today, I'd just like to try and give you my best piece of advice for each. The things that I know can have the biggest impact with the least amount of effort. So let's start right at the top with your resume. And the first thing that I'll say is that your resume or your CV, it's never going to get you a job on its own. It's essentially a way of getting probability to work in your favor. The more interviews that you can get through to because of your resume, or CV as we as we call it, the better the chance of you landing the role that you want. So don't let a bad CV or resume hold you back from that by not even giving you that chance to really show what you've got. Um, and there are three things that I've noticed that can make a data science resume stand out over others. And like I promised, these are super simple but very effective. Firstly, you really want to make sure that you include a summary at the top, briefly outlining what you can bring to the role. But but always mention in the summary that you're looking to solve business problems with data science solutions. Like literally put those words in. I look to solve business problems with data science solutions. Now that at first listen, you're going to say, well, that seems like a pretty tame sentence. How could that possibly make a difference? But believe me, that can really make you stand out over a lot of the other candidates who are simply shouting about the skills that they have. At the end of the day, you are being hired to solve business problems. So you've immediately synced with this in your opening description. Next, when listing out the projects that you have worked on in the past, and this makes up a big part of your resume or CV, and it's a big part of what the reader is actually focusing on, for each project, make sure that you include these three things. So one sentence on what the task or the business problem was, so some context for the reader. one sentence on what the tools and techniques you used were. So essentially, what did you actually do? And then finally, and this is almost always left off, one sentence around what the result was. And if you can, make sure you use tangible figures where possible. So, for example, it drove $100,000 in revenue, or it increased signups by 4%, or it reduced costs by 20% year on year. These tangible figures really sell in the fact that you're someone who knows how to add value with your skills. So make sure you get the figures in if you can. Sometimes you might not know the exact figures, but try your best to put in some sort of impact or result. And trust me, 90% of candidates, they'll just focus on the what you did section. They don't give the context of those other two. So again, this can be a really simple change, but it can really help you stand out over other candidates. And if you do include all three of those sections for each of the projects that you've done, it starts ticking these subconscious boxes in the hiring manager's brain that you're different from the rest, that you understand the context of what you do in true business, in terms of true business considerations, and that sort of thing can be gold dust. The reality is it's not all about your technical skills. It's all about showcasing the value that you can add with those technical skills. And the third resume or CV tip that I want to give is about the section where you might list out the courses you've completed or the certificates that you've earned. Now, before I move on to the specific tip that I want to give you here, I want to say one thing, and it's that there is often a lot of negativity on platforms such as LinkedIn about people posting their certificates. You get these kind of gatekeepers, as I call them, bad mouthing anyone who posts a certificate, saying that it doesn't mean anything. So my sort of first semi bit of advice is don't worry about these very petty little sad people that say that. You should be super proud of achieving a certificate, no matter what it is. And I think you should post it on LinkedIn and you should include it on your resume. But just know that it won't hold that much weight with a hiring manager when they see them listed on your resume, unless you can add in one very simple and minor addition. And that is, for each of those courses or certificates that you've got listed, supplement it with the actionable learnings that you got from it. So the things that you got from the online course or that you got en route to earning that certificate. So instead of just putting NLP 101 on Udemy, like you see in the middle of the screen here, list it and then underneath put one or two sentences showing what you learned, but more importantly, what could you build or create using what you learned? So, and I've just made this up for illustrative purposes. You could have NLP 101 on Udemy, actionable learnings, sentiment analysis on customer reviews. This could be utilized to flag up customer complaints to a dedicated support team, improving customer satisfaction. So, like I say, I've just made that up. But the key point is this. Instead of a hiring manager just seeing words and not really being able to extrapolate how this course or certificate you've taken might help them, which at the end of the day is what they're really wanting to see, you've started the cogs in their brain turning, and it's another subconscious addition to their view of you as a value-adding data scientist. And believe me, hardly anybody does this. So it's another very simple addition that you can put in to make you stand out from your competition. Right, so let's keep moving. And next I want to talk to you about portfolios and the projects within them. So portfolios can be a really good way to showcase your skills when you're early on in your data science or your analytical career. But I want to quickly bust a myth about these projects, and that is that data science portfolio projects need to use either huge volumes of data or be applying extremely complex machine learning or deep learning based solutions. Trust me, they really, really don't. So we can safely say that that is a big old myth. A varied portfolio of clearly communicated projects can be much more beneficial. So when you're building up your portfolio, look to put much more emphasis on clarity and impact rather than just complexity. So in exactly the same way as I talked about with resumes, the reality is that hiring managers are super busy with their day-to-day tasks or their, of their actual job. And recruiters sometimes have, 100 or maybe more candidates to screen. You need to make it quick and easy for these guys to see your value. And easy is not screeds of code. It's not super complex algorithms without any context around what this approach is actually solving. So my main pieces of advice for portfolio projects are, at the very top of your write-up, whether it's on GitHub or wherever else that you're presenting your project, include a really easy to digest summary of the project right from inception through to conclusion. So the summary would include a brief overview of the business problem that you're attacking with this piece of work, a brief overview of the final solution that you chose, and then a brief overview of the results that you saw. And again, just like with resumes, this is all about making the life of the reader easy. If they can understand your project before diving into all of the technical details, then this is great for them, and subsequently it's great for you. It just gives the reader a really quick overview of what's to follow in all of its gory and impressive technical detail. And speaking of the detail, if you want to be structuring the full write-up for your project in that same way, so starting with the context, in other words, what's the problem you're looking to solve, and perhaps what might success look like in this case, and then you'll follow that up with a section around the actions, in other words, what you did. So that's where the code will be: data exploration, data visualization. And then once you've done that, in a section all of its own, emphasize the results and the impact of your project. And this goes beyond things like accuracy metrics of a machine learning model. Explain the impact that this project might have on a business or a customer. This is the most important part of a real world project, the impact that it has. And it's often what hiring managers are most interested in seeing from you. So, trust me that this will have a big impact on them. And again, this is something that is just missed out on so many candidates' portfolio projects. Now, I did touch on code before. So at a very high level, just make absolutely certain that it's really clear and well documented. If you have many different parts, break it up into the functional sections rather than just one long file or one long notebook. Again, it's just about making the life of the reader easy. Make it easy for them to see your value rather than putting your portfolio of projects in the too hard basket. And finally, a much higher level piece of advice: just pick projects or data sets that excite you or interest you. And why do I say this? Well, when you're working on a project that genuinely excites you, you're going to be far more motivated to ask the right questions or ask more questions. You're going to dig deeper into the data, and you're going to be keen to test out a lot of different solutions. And on top of that, that excitement or passion when you're talking about that project will shine through when you're discussing it in an interview. Seeing passionate candidates is such a huge turn on for a hiring manager. They can see the value that you could add over time. And this is a massive positive for them, both consciously and subconsciously. So that's my high level, sort of simple but impactful advice for portfolios. Remember, clarity and impact over complexity, and then a structure that makes it quick and easy or a quick and easy job for the reader to see the value that you can add. So you're essentially at a point now where your resume has got you in the door, your portfolio has impressed, and now it's time to really face the music and head into the formal interview stage. And like you all know, this can consist of many different things, like coding tests, take-home assignments, and then the more behavioral-based questions. So let's take a quick look at each of those. And firstly, coding tests, as these will often take place earlier in the hiring process. And as a bit of background, for Data Science Infinity, I regularly speak with a lot of data science leaders, hiring managers, and recruiters from various companies around the world to ensure that the curriculum and advice that I'm giving is on point. And the latest statistics that I've got around this are that 61% of data science hiring managers do get candidates to undertake a coding test of some sort, 29% do sometimes, and 10% don't. Now, I would look at those percentages and I would say, yep, this is definitely something I need to be prepared for. And a coding test can just take on so many different forms. It can be based on different coding languages. It can be different, varying levels of difficulty. It can even just be based around the more core concepts from statistics and probability. It really does depend on the company, the role, and the team that the role will be in. But The test is normally going to take place sometime after you've spoken to either human resources or the recruiter that you're working with. So my simple high level advice for coding test is to just make sure you ask everything about it on that call that you have. Ask what it involves, ask what coding language it'll be, ask exactly how it will be conducted. Will it be done online? Will it be done on an internal company portal, or will it be undertaken on, a platform such as HackerRank or LeetCode, etc.? Just get as much information as you can. If you can be more prepared than other candidates because you were sensible enough to ask those questions, then straight away you're putting yourself in an advantageous position. Now, for most entry-level data science or data analyst positions, this test is simply going to be based in SQL, potentially Python and R. Sometimes you can even choose which language you want to answer the questions in, and the level of difficulty is going to vary. But often it will start with more basic questions and then move up to more complex ones. If the role is more focused around insights and analytics, then the test is going to be less complex coding wise than for a role which is more focused on engineering type skills. But long story short, just get as much information around what it will entail and then practice. There's nothing better for this type of test than being in the right mindset, and that really just comes from consistent practice. And there are a lot of online resources for this, but just make sure you're focusing on the right thing. Don't get super stressed out trying to answer all sorts of insanely complex software engineering questions, for example, when you aren't going to be needing that. Anyway, you've done the coding test. You're now at a stage where you've nailed that, and you've now got a take-home assignment on your hands. So let's discuss take-home assignments. And not all companies will make you do these. Again, from my research for Data Science Infinity, we're looking at around 55% of hiring managers utilizing take-home assignments for candidates and 45% not. And even though 55% might be lower than you think, if you're applying for 10 roles, then you'd be expected to do this for about 5 or 6 of them. So it is good to know how to approach them in a way that will impress and in a way that will put you ahead of the other candidates who are applying for the role. So my number one sort of piece of advice, or the number one thing that you should remember, is to always make sure you understand the precise problem that you're being asked. If you don't quite understand, make sure you get clarification, but make sure you ask early. Sometimes they're going to be vague on purpose, but either way, it's best to ask for anything that you're not sure about before starting. And this seems like a super obvious piece of advice, but don't be afraid to just get some confirmations if you need them. Otherwise, you're just going to waste a lot of time. Next, and I think this is a really, really important one, think about why they're getting you to do this particular task. There will be some specific motivation behind it. If you figure that they're trying to get you to showcase your coding abilities, then you can focus more on that. If you think it's more about storytelling and visualization, then you can lean more into that. Most likely, they're probably going to be looking at a number of things, but if you figure there might be something of particular interest, then you can make sure you do that part really, really well. And another way to approach this is think about what this role would entail day to day and try to show those skills as best you can. Next, make assumptions where necessary. It's completely fine to make assumptions about the data or the company as long as you state them as assumptions. If you are going to make assumptions about the company and it turns out to be incorrect, that's not actually a big deal. I mean, the reality is you can't be expected to know everything about their operations, but just try to make these assumptions as sensible as possible. When starting work on the assignment itself, and this is something that I've worked with a lot of the guys in Data Science Infinity, something that can be especially useful, especially if they don't give you much time to complete it, is to quickly sketch out a high-level plan and separate everything into 2 parts, which I call the necessities and the luxuries. And what I mean by this is, say you think, based on the information given for this take-home assignment, there needs to be some data exploration and cleaning, there needs to be a predictive model built, and then perhaps there needs to be a summary of the results or the outcomes that you've seen. Sketch up a plan of the basic steps, almost like an MVP or a minimum viable product, where you're just looking to get something in place. And these are your necessities. These make up the bare minimum requirements for the assignment. Once you've noted those down, have a bit of a think about the unique or the special things that you could add for a version 2 of the assignment. And these are your luxuries. So instead of just data exploration and cleaning, perhaps as a luxury, you could mock up the design of an ETL process that would extract and load the data. Instead of, excuse me, instead of just building a predictive model, think up different models or algorithms that you could test in a way that you could judge them. Maybe even think about how you might refine the model's parameters to get the best results. And instead of just summarizing the results, perhaps you could do, some more in-depth data visualization. What I've just run through is a very, very simple example, but the point I'm getting to is come up with a way to get an MVP version in place, just the bare necessities, and then go for it. Get that work done and save that as a version 1. Then if you've got time left after that, pick from your list of luxuries and see if you can add some of your flair to the project. The reason that this can be quite good is you're never going to run out of time this way. You're always going to have a baseline solution that you can get in front of them. And if you do run out of time and you haven't managed to complete everything in both the necessities and the luxuries lists, then you can just add a section which talks about the list of luxuries which you've noted down. In terms of, if I had more time, I would have looked at X, Y, and Z, and that can actually really impress as well. So even though you didn't have the time to do it, they can see that these are things that you think are important. So now you're at the stage where you've smashed the take-home assignment and you're heading in for the big one, the on-site interview, where you're going to be answering more behavioral-based questions. So I want to give you the absolute simplest way to nail these types of questions, and that is to prepare in the same way that you'd want to answer. And the best way to do this is using the STAR format. And while you've no doubt, well, most of you at least will have heard of the STAR format, today I'm going to share a bonus letter at the end of this magical acronym that can really make you stand out from other candidates. And to give full and deserved credit for this mystery letter, I must give out a shout out to Gigi, the AKA the Amazon interview whiz, pictured bottom right on screen there. And Gigi is an ex-colleague of mine from Amazon who came up with this extra letter. So if you are looking for, without doubt, the best interview advice that I've come across, then look up the Amazon interview whiz on YouTube. You won't be disappointed with that. Just a little tip. Anyway, let's run through the STAR format now. And like I say, super, super simple, but very effective. So for each project that you might need to talk about in the interview, when you're preparing, make sure you're well versed on S, which stands for situation. And this is the context around the business problem and why it needed to be solved. And starting with this context really pulls the interviewer into your narrative, and it gives you a foundation for you to go into all of the details without losing them later on. Next is T for task. So what was your specific role in the broader project? So super simple, you don't need to spend much time here, but it's good to be transparent about what your responsibilities were and where you were in more of a supporting role. Next is actions, and this refers to the specific actions you took from inception through to conclusion. And this is where most of your answer is going to lie. Now, when you're preparing for this section for each of your projects, refine it down to the most succinct and compelling narrative that you can, but ensure that you keep supplementary context up your sleeve. For example, why did you choose solution C over solution A and B? Why did you choose that type of predictive model over the other ones that you might have tested? So the decisions you made and the justifications for those decisions. A good interviewer will ask these types of questions. So it's really good to have those at front of mind. Next is results. Super important, but so often missed or underemphasized in candidates' answers and interviews. And just like we talked about for other parts of the process, like your resume or even in portfolio projects, look to use tangible figures where possible. So for example, it drove a certain number of dollars sales, or it saved a certain number of hours per week. Now, I did mention that I had another letter to add at the end of our acronym, so the suspense can now be over, and I can tell you that this letter is I for improvement. And this is huge. I agree with Gigi, the Amazon interview was very much on this one. So for each project that you're preparing for before going into an interview, ask yourself, if I could have started this project again now, what would I do differently? And this sort of thinking can be so much more impactful than you might think. It shows awareness of business impact. It shows an understanding of the nuance of what you do from a technical point of view. And it also just more broadly shows a growth mindset that you're always looking to build on your skills and to improve. And trust me, that is a lethal combination in an interview. So I'm not exactly sure how long that all took. Hopefully not too far off the 25 to 30 minutes that Josh mentioned. But the final thing I want to say is that you may have actually noticed, as I've been running through the slides, everything that I've talked about today, whether it's your resume, your portfolio of projects, or how you're answering questions within interviews, it all really boils down to the same overarching idea. In this field, when you're whether you're looking for your first role or if you're looking to move up into the next role in your career, it's really not about it's not about showing how many skills you have or how many concepts you know. It's all about demonstrating and showcasing clearly the value that you can add with those skills. So if you take that mindset and think about each project that you've worked on or that you are working on and prepare for interviews in that way, then you are really, really going to shine and you're going to stand out over a lot of other candidates. Trust me on that. Now, before we actually jump over to the Q&A session, which Josh has mentioned, because Josh mentioned when I spoke to him yesterday that I should do this, if you all don't mind, I'm going to be very quick. I'd just like to share some very high-level details about my data science program, Data Science Infinity, as it could be something really relevant for some of you guys. And like I mentioned earlier, I've created Data Science Infinity in a way that's different to other courses that are available on other platforms, because this is truly all about the learning journey rather than any fixed destination. It's all about students getting the results they want, whatever that may be, whether that's just learning or if it's actually landing a role in the field of data science or data analytics. And there are essentially four main parts to the program which set it apart. So firstly, you're going to learn the right content. So everything in the curriculum is based around conversations that I've had with hundreds of leaders, hiring managers, and recruiters in the field. So you know that you're focusing your time learning the skills that hiring managers actually want from somebody who's getting into the data science field. There's currently over 220 tutorials covering things like SQL, Python, statistics, A/B testing, GitHub, machine learning, the softer skills that can genuinely be the difference between a good data scientist and a great data scientist, and then a full section on optimizing your resume and help with interviewing, much like what we've covered today, just in more detail and not quite so rapidly delivered. Second, you learn everything in the right way. So everything has a really, really strong focus on intuition and understanding. We learn and apply concepts hands-on as well, using real-world project-based application. Thirdly, the program and therefore you as a student will evolve over time. So you get unlimited access to all current content, but you also get unlimited access to all future content as well. So I'm currently in the process of adding a big new section on deep learning, and I'm going to add some other great stuff this year as well, including two really cool projects that you can add to your portfolio. One using a genetic algorithm, which is one of the coolest things I've ever come across within the field of data science, and one using the A-star pathfinding algorithm, which is something I played around with a little bit at Sony PlayStation. And these are the types of projects that will really make you stand out from the crowd. And then, like I say, it's all about the journey. It's all about getting the results that you want. So if you want it, then I offer unlimited and dedicated guidance and support and mentorship. So you're never going to get stuck or demotivated. And I can support you with, things like specific problems that you're facing, or support you with the interview preparation for the particular role that you're going for. And it really works. So on the right, I've put a couple of bits of feedback that I've got recently. Many of the students are now starting to land roles. And in terms of the learning itself, the reviews have also been really good as well. So if that sounds interesting to you, then you can check out datascienceinfinity.com, which you can see down on the bottom left of screen. Or alternatively, you can just send me an email with some questions to andrew@analyticslink.com, or you can, of course, DM me on LinkedIn as well. I spend all day on LinkedIn, so I will definitely get back to you.